People often imagine the Puritans as dressed in plain black. But when I went to the United States to look for surviving garments from the Pilgrim era, what I found told a more complex story. Hello, I am Masako Hamada. I am a researcher in American fashion history. The title of this lecture is A Hidden Story of Clothing in Early New England. Overview is as follows. Chapter 1, The Historical Background. Section 1, Puritan Migration to the Netherlands. Section 2, Puritan Migration to North America. Chapter 2, The Founding of New England and its Clothing Culture. Hardships in Building Plymouth Colony. Chapter 3, A Research Journey into Pilgrim Clothing. This chapter is the highlight of this lecture. Chapter 4, Interpreting the Surviving Garments. Chapter 5, What did the Pilgrims really wear? Chapter 6, Men's Clothing in New England from 1630 to 1670. Chapter 7, Women's Clothing in New England from 1630 to 1670. Chapter 8, Conclusion. Chapter 1, The Historical Background. Section 1, Puritan Migration to the Netherlands. In the early 17th century, England was deeply divided by religion. Groups later known as Pilgrims and Puritans sought further reform of the Church of England. Some chose exile rather than conformity. Many first moved to the Netherlands, where they hoped to live more freely. Yet life there did not solve every problem. Questions of stability, livelihood, and the future of their children still remained. Section 2, Puritan Migration to the American Continent. In 1620, one group crossed the Atlantic on the Mayflower. When they arrived at Cape Cod, they created what we now call the Mayflower Compact. In the name of God, Amen. Signed below, we are royal subjects of King James I, King of England, a monarch revered by the grace of God, King of the Faith, and many others of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, and so on. It was an agreement intended to preserve civil order under uncertain conditions. Over the following decades, English settlements spread across the region that came to be known as New England. This was not simply a story of religion. It was also a story of migration, adaptation, and the difficult work of building new communities. This is a map of 13 colonies. This colony is New Hampshire, and this colony is Massachusetts, and this colony is Rhode Island, this colony is Connecticut. These 4 colonies are New England. Northern New England colonies were settled as follows. For clarity, we should distinguish between first settlement, colony formation, later royal charter. New Hampshire was settled in like this. Connecticut was settled like this. Rhode Island was settled like this. Massachusetts was settled like this. Regional characteristics. A society of small-scale farmers based on the town system of land ownership. Town system is a unique local government that developed during the colonial era in New England. This is a statue of William Bradford, governor and historian of Plymouth colony. I took this photograph at Plymouth. Chapter 2, The Founding of New England and its Closing. When people imagine early New England, they often picture severe faces and plain black clothing, but that image is too simple. The first settlers faced extreme hardship. Cold winters, food shortages, disease, and exhausting labor. In such a world, clothing had to do many things at once. It had to protect the body, it had to preserve warmth, and it had to endure daily wear. This certainly reflected belief, but it was also shaped by climate, material availability, trade networks, occupation, and social rank. For that reason, apparel in early New England cannot be explained by religion alone. To understand what people were, we must also consider survival class household production and the continuing influence of European dress traditions. This chapter is a highlight of this lecture. Chapter 3, Field Research Story. For me, this question became more than a matter of reading documents. I wanted to see surviving objects with my own eyes. Years ago, I traveled alone to the United States in search of garments associated with the Pilgrim era. My first destination was the Essex Institute in Salem, Massachusetts. Miss Alice Morse Earle said in her book, 2 Centuries of Costume in America, Volume 1, to the Essex Institute in Salem, Massachusetts, the Pilgrim Fathers had a baptismal shirt and mittens of William Bradford, second governor of Plymouth, born in 1590, and a photo of a shirt and mittens with pleats on the sleeve is posted. Where I hope to learn more about objects that had once been preserved there. But I soon discovered that some of the materials had been moved. My original plan was no longer enough, so I changed course and continued to Plymouth. At Pilgrim Hall, after careful arrangements, I was finally able to examine small surviving garments. Including a baby's shirt, and a pair of mittens, a traditional associated with William Bradford's family. Standing before these fragile objects, I felt that history became suddenly concrete. These were not abstract references in a book. They were material traces of real lives. Section 5. Interpreting the surviving garments. What struck me most was not simplicity alone, but workmanship. The sleeves of the small shirt showed fine pleating. Were the earlier writers described as goffering? There must surely have been a pinching machine or a goffering machine, Earle noted. The collar and cuffs were made of contrasting materials. Even the small details suggested careful labor and technical knowledge. These features matter because they remind us that early colonial clothing was not purely rough or improvised. Even in a harsh environment, people did not abandon skill, form, or inherited sewing practices. In other words, these garments suggest continuity as well as adaptation. They connect the New World to older European traditions of making, wearing, and valuing clothes. For historians of dress, such evidence is especially important because it preserves techniques and visual habits that later disappeared from common use. Chapter 5. What did the Pilgrims really wear? What then did pilgrim clothing actually look like? Men generally wore garments such as doublets, breeches, waistcoats, stockings, cloaks, and felt hats. Women wore bodices, petticoats, aprons, kerchiefs, caps, and gowns. These forms were not invented in New England. They were adapted from contemporary English dress. This point is crucial. The Puritans did not create an entirely separate fashion system. Rather, they tended to reject excessive display and to value modesty, usefulness, and restraint. But restraint did not mean uniformity, and it certainly did not mean that everyone dressed in plain black. Clothing varied according to means, context, and personal choice. The familiar image of a single Puritan costume is therefore misleading. There is no one fixed Puritan dress. There were only different ways of dressing within a shared moral and social world. Chapter 6. Men's clothing in New England, 1630 to 1670. As New England society developed, clothing also reflected social difference more clearly. Men's clothing included practical garments suited to work and protection. The waist of the jacket has a draped cloth, sagging collar knickerbockers. The top is a tubular trouser with a straight waist cut. Such as durable coats, leather garments, wool stockings, and sturdy shoes. In frontier conditions, durability mattered greatly. At the same time, not all men dressed alike. Clergymen and magistrates often cultivated an image of sober authority. Merchants and prosperous households had access to better fabrics and more fashionable variations. Farmers, laborers, servants, and sailors wore clothing shaped more directly by work, weather, and available resources. Even within a society that praised modesty, clothing continued to mark rank, occupation, and economic difference. In this sense, dress in New England was never only moral. It was also social. Chapter 7, Women's Clothing in New England, 1630-1670. Women's clothing in early New England. The front center of the top is pointed, and the skirt is gathered. There is an inverted V-shaped opening on the front body, and the contrasting material is inlaid, and the apron is attached. Topped with a draped collar with lace, she wears a muff on her left hand. Was likewise more varied than stereotype suggests. Bodices, skirts, aprons, linen accessories, caps, kerchiefs, and cloaks form the base of everyday dress. Over time, details of cut, sleeve treatment, neckwear, and decoration changed. Some women wore garments of considerable quality. Even where sumptuary ideas or legal restrictions discouraged luxury, aspiration and differentiation did not disappear. Fine fabric, careful trimming, and fashionable construction could still communicate status. This is important because the history of dress is never only about rules. It is also about negotiation between belief and desire, between communal ideals and personal expression, and between moral discipline and material reality. Chapter 8, Conclusion. Why did Puritan dress become simpler? Not only because of religion, but also because of environment, labor, economy, and social order. In early New England, clothing was a record of how people lived. It tells about belief, certainly, but also about hardship, adaptation, craftsmanship, and identity. If we look closely at these garments, we do not see a flat image of black-clad uniformity. We see a far more complex human story. Through clothing, the settlers of early New England become visible again, not as a stereotype, but as people. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this lecture, please like and subscribe. In the next episode, we will continue exploring Masako Hamada's book, A Social History of American Fashion, Revised Edition, POD Publishing, 2022.